Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace.
Welcome to Uncomfortable Conversations with Each Other about Race. My name is Beth Givens, and I'm the pastor at Wellborn United Methodist Church in Richmond, Virginia. In the wake of George Floyd's death and the rising conversations about race and policing in the United States, we at Wellborn, a predominantly white congregation, were looking for ways to have conversation about these issues because understanding is the starting point for transformation. We decided that creating this podcast might be a good first step, especially after one of our small groups liked Emmanuel Acho's series, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, which I encourage you to also check out. So, thanks for joining us for this episode of Uncomfortable Conversations with Each Other about Race.
Hey, Erin, it is good to see you. Thanks for being here for this experimental podcast, videocast about uncomfortable conversations with each other about race. Let's start by tell us all a little bit about, what decade of life you're in, where you grew up, kind of what your background is, and how you came to Wellborn.
Well, I'm a school counselor. I'm a mom. I have two children who are 12 and almost 9. I spent a good portion of my childhood all over. We started, I guess I was born in Kentucky, which is a little known fact that probably no one knows. My parents moved around a lot, but most of my younger, early years was in New York, in the northern section of the country. And then we moved to the South, which is kind of where a little bit of the stories will come from that you'll hear in a bit. And so my family is all still in New York and near Buffalo.
Okay.
And so me and my parents and my sister were the only 4 people that don't live in that area. We are the only people that moved out of that area, that moved to the South. And my parents still live in North Carolina to this day. I grew up a little bit in Virginia Beach. I graduated high school there, but then my parents since moved. I went to JMU for college and VCU for grad school, and I've been a school counselor at Ridge Elementary in Henrico County for 16 years.
Wow.
Passion for, helping kids and being a very strong advocate for doing what's best for kids. So sometimes my boldness comes in handy when it needs to for kids.
Yep. And you have been instrumental in helping Ridge be such a strong partner with our food pantry and just interconnected both of our ministries, because what you do is a ministry, and you claim that sometimes hard to do.
Oh yeah,
in the school system.
Definitely.
But, it's definitely a call. So do you have a story from your life about race that is kind of, I think we all have this kind of defining moment stories.
So as I mentioned, my whole family was from a very small town near Buffalo, and they all still live there to this day. And my dad, with his job, was transferred. He got a new job in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a very diverse area. And I don't know that I'd ever seen a Black person until we moved to Charlotte. And of course, there was many Black families that lived around us. We had bought a new house in a development. It was a very nice middle-class area. For us, it was a huge step for my parents. They felt like we had made it. Finally, we had a nice house, and there were several Black families around us, and I became very good friends with a little girl who was Black, and she started hanging out with us all the time and would come over. I don't think I really knew any difference. I think I recognized that she was Black and I was white, but I definitely at that point didn't know that she might be treated differently because she was Black. So I don't think my parents had any, racism outwardly toward any families that were Black. There was no prejudice there. There was nothing they ever said. There was never any reason to discourage us from hanging out. Just a funny random story, she stayed over one night and my mom gave her a bath because that, that's what you do when you're little. And my mom washed her hair, and which is, my mom just didn't know that that's not how Black people take care of their hair. My mom had no idea. But she just accepted her as she was and just took her in. Of course, the little girl's mom was very upset because it's expensive to get your hair done, and she didn't have the right products for her hair and all. So it wasn't out of any reason to be, to harm the child. It was just that she didn't know. But then when my grandparents would come down, it would be a little bit different. And then I started to hear my grandparents use the N-word. And I really just didn't understand what was going on and why there was this, why it wasn't okay, or why they treated the neighbors across the street, like why they saw it as odd that they were so nice. It was like they were shocked that the Black families were nice. Like, it would be weird that they were nice. Like, it's so cool that they're nice. So that's when I started to realize that something was different. It wasn't until the introduction of the family from outside of my personal family that I realized like something was off.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my first experience. I think I was probably 6 or 7.
Wow. That stays with you.
Yeah.
You said you went to high school in Virginia Beach and
Yes.
college at JMU. Any from those periods, any stories that stick out for you?
I don't think I really started to understand like, white privilege and my experience, and understand that really until college. I don't think until I became more educated and started taking classes in psychology, and definitely not on a deeper level until VCU, when I really started to study how to help students and really get into equity and what that means and how different kids need different things based on what their needs are, not that everybody gets the same thing. So I don't really think I evolved really that much. I think my parents were very much the treat everyone the same. Because they were, you need to be kind, you need to be nice. I don't think they truly understood what was happening in society. Love them, no disrespect to them. I don't think they were there yet, and maybe still aren't. But I don't think I really truly understood it until I did more research on my own and really became more educated on the topic. And that was probably like late college at JMU and definitely at VCU and grad school. And in grad school, as a school counselor, you have to do so much introspection and reflection and journaling, and you have to conquer your own biases and think about like who you might be biased against and what your implicit biases are, because you can't have that when you have kids walk in your room. I mean, if you have implicit biases or you have things that you are uncomfortable with, like that shows. And how are you going to be welcoming to your students if you don't know what those are and deal with them?
Yeah. Not erase them, but become self-aware. So
yes, and deal with them. Yeah.
That they're there. Yeah. So are you uncomfortable talking about race?
I am absolutely not uncomfortable talking about it. It has been the topic of our conversations at our house so much lately. My kids are like, do we have to keep talking about this? Like, I feel like it's like the more you talk about it, the easier it gets. And it's just, it's just something we absolutely have to talk about. And the fact that we are just now having these conversations and the fact that we still call them uncomfortable is just the flashing red lights of our white privilege. Like, Black people have been having these conversations their whole life. And it just shows even more how privileged we are that we're just now having to have all these conversations and own up to what we've been hiding from for all these years. But if you do any reading from Black authors or do any research, you will see that these conversations have they've been being had for so long. And we are just now starting to get in the mix, and we need to learn, and not take over them. We need to learn and kind of be there, but also be a part of them so we can become allies and co-conspirators.
Yeah. Co-conspirators. I love that. It reminds me of co-creators with God and all of that good stuff. So I'm reading Between the World and Me right now by, I'm going to not say his name right, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Are there books that you've read that, would say, hey, this would be a great one for, you probably gonna pull up a reading list or something for me, right? But
well, recently the book I read, I think is more, it's a little deep for non-educators. It was called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Yeah. But it's very much an academic book, and it was written by a psychologist, and I think it's kind of like, I feel like it would be a book you would read if you were taking a college class.
Yeah.
I know this is on my list. So you want to talk about race, and I'm just starting this, and then I'm picking up White Fragility today, actually, from a friend. I'm trying to borrow them. I have a Kindle, but it's just when you have these books that you feel like you really want to, just really get into, I'd rather have them
hold it in my hand.
Yeah, hold it. And a lot of them are sold out. So we're all trying to swap around.
So I just finished White Fragility, I want to say in like May. I had started it in January. And it probably borders on a little bit more academic than sort of narrative and full of story, if you will. But it was a hard book, but a really important book. And I need to start How to Be Anti-Racist. I think I have the title right.
Yes. I've heard that one is great. Also, we have I formed a little book club, and we had teachers that were interested, and so we met yesterday and we read that book together, and we did a meetup, a Google Meet, and talked about, not everybody had finished it, but talked about like what our plans are for the school year and what we need to do and what can we do to change things. And some of them are more large scale, like curriculum and things like that. And some of our are just things that we need to talk about for our particular school, and things that we need to talk about for ourselves.
That's great that you took that initiative, though. That's fabulous.
It started because right after things happened, I just reached out and I said, we just need to talk. Because if we were at school, right, we would be together and we would sit in a big room, but we couldn't do that. So I just set up a Google Meet. I said, come if you need to talk. And a lot of people came, and we said, well, why don't we read a book? And so we decided on a book, and then a couple weeks later we met.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's kind of what, my sense is at Wellborn, we need to talk. And where everybody is stressed out, zoomed out, not necessarily going to get together to do a small group, but this is a way to push the conversation out and help us ask questions. So, when somebody, you've said white privilege a couple times, when somebody says white privilege, or when you hear that word, what do you think and what do you feel? And maybe how has that changed for you over time?
I guess originally when I used to hear it, I guess maybe like the rest of the world, I think you feel like that little twinge of guilt. And I think that, and that guilt is starting to go away because I'm taking action. I don't really feel that guilty because I haven't done anything to feel guilty about, and I'm starting to feel more empowered because there are things that I can personally do. And these are conversations that I'm having with my children and with people around me who are not bad people, who literally just don't know any better. And I do know better. So these are tough, like uncomfortable conversations. But if you use your voice to do something, I feel like it's not about feeling bad. But I do know that, like I mentioned, my family moved around a lot, and there were times when we had really hard times. And I feel like if we were a Black family, it could have been very different. My life could be very different. I went to college by myself. I paid my whole entire way. Nobody helped me with anything. Would that have been possible if I were Black? Like there are just different things that could have happened for me differently. And so I'm able to recognize that I don't need to feel super bad about it. I do need to recognize it and own the fact that it exists and it's there, and take action and do something. So instead of feeling bad, I feel like I just want to do something.
So remind me at the end to circle back with just maybe you can offer a couple of suggestions to the average person about what they can do.
Well, if you have kids, I feel like talking about them is so important because I think it's one of those things where you think that they're not listening or they don't know, but they are, and they do know. And it kind of alludes to another question that we can get into, but things that we might say, where it's just like, we treat everyone equally. We're just going to be kind to everyone. Everyone is the same. And these are things that we do because we think that kids can't handle tough conversations, but kids are really smart. Yeah.
And that's you're talking about the idea of like color blindness and
Yes.
because we do hear people say, well, I'm not racist, I'm colorblind. And I think what you're saying is that's not the approach to take with kids.
And it's not do we want children to be kind to everyone? Yes. Do we want to tell them that you have to be kind to everyone because everyone is equal and that you're colorblind and you don't see color? No, because when you tell a child that everyone is equal, what you're doing is you're taking away from the idea that there is systemic racism, because there's been barriers and there's been things that have happened over and over time. I mean, you can, Google that history. I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but there has been things that have prevented Black people from progressing as quickly or to different places as there have been for white people. And when you say everyone is equal, we're all the same, if Black people aren't as far as white people, what it insinuates or implies is that Black people or people of color aren't working as hard as us.
Yeah.
That's a tough pill to swallow, to say, oh yeah, we're all equal, so you're here and I'm here, it's because I work harder. Yeah. And that's absolutely not true. And that is just awful to me, to insinuate that it's because you're not working as hard, you're not as smart, or you're just not as good as us. So I think you have to be really careful with the colorblind, or we're all equal.
What do you say instead? I mean, okay, everybody's not equal, right?
I think you say we want to treat everyone equally, but there are different people that are treated unfairly sometimes, and you tell them how that is. For instance, Sean has a really close friend. He actually went to my school, and they ended up being in the same classes, and he's Black. And I would love nothing more for them to be best friends, because this little boy is just the most amazing child ever. He got the biggest citizenship. But I explained to him, I said, if you were to walk into a gas station and something were to go missing, it might be assumed that this little boy did it and you didn't, just because of the color of his skin. I mean, these are conversations that I had to have. And the look on my son's face was horror, right? But I think that, like, to lie and to tell him that wasn't happening, or that might not happening, is more dangerous, because he might perpetuate his own biases by not knowing accidentally. And the same for Carter, who goes to a school where she's actually a minority as white. She treats everyone the same, because Ridge is amazing, but I still think she needs to know what's going on. She ironically said one day to the music teacher, why do we need to celebrate Black History Month? Because she goes to a school where everyone is treated equally. So she didn't even know. And that was on me.
Right.
That was my fault for not making her aware. Yeah. So I'm not perfect. I have not done the most perfect job, but that's my time to reflect and grow and say, whoa, hold up. Like, she did not understand. I need to do a better job. These conversations need to be had.
And that's partly why you're a United Methodist, because we're always moving on to perfection. We aren't ever there yet. We're always growing into it, which is right. Good news. So are you ever worried? And I mean, you have these conversations perhaps more than anybody else I'm talking with, because I mean, this is your professional life in some ways. Are you ever worried about getting it wrong?
No, I'm definitely not worried about getting it wrong, because I'm one of those people that I'm not super anxious, but I do reflect. So if I do something and I'm like, and that could have gone better, then I just reflect and I'm like, I need to learn. It's part of having the growth mindset too. Like, if we're going to learn from our mistakes, we just need to look back and say, what did I do that I need to do better next time? And I fix it. So I'm not worried about getting it wrong, because the only way we're going to get it wrong, I think, is by doing nothing. And I think that doing nothing is the only way to get it wrong. Like, standing by and saying nothing. Like, doing nothing is saying, I'm okay with, the way that things are going. I'm okay with the way you're talking about, people of color. I'm okay with that joke that maybe I'm not okay with, but I'm not going to say anything. So that means I am okay. So doing nothing means you're okay.
It's the dichotomy between silence and speaking, knowing that you risk getting it wrong, but there's a risk with silence too. And so we've got to be brave.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like super awkward and uncomfortable. It can be so much like, I've learned a lot in the past couple of weeks, in the past couple of months, since so much of this information has come to light. And I've reflected on my own choices, and I just want to share this. I learned this recently, and I realized that, for instance, African American, that's not the real correct term. Black people want to be called Black people. Because not everybody is from Africa. And also that's a traumatizing, very, very upsetting history that they don't really want to claim. So you can just say Black people. Or I really learned this recently, and I just want to share it with you. Maybe you didn't know. It doesn't have to be this, you're doing something wrong and I can't believe you talk like that thing. It can be just, I'm learning too, and I am on this journey with you.
Yeah, I love that language of co-learners. Again, co-conspirators, co-learners, that we're all on the journey together. That's great. So when you see the hashtag Black Lives Matter, can you name an emotion you feel?
Honestly, like, it makes me excited. Like, I'm just happy. I know that it brings up a lot of emotion for a lot of people, but I know that it stemmed from so much tragedy and negativity and like hurt and just awfulness, but it makes me excited to see that we're together and doing, I just feel like something's different this time. Like, Black Lives Matter has been around for a long time. I don't even know how many years, a long time, but this time something feels different to me, and we're seeing changes. We're talking about, changing flags in different states, and we've got monuments. We're talking about changing curriculum in schools. We've got community forums with kids sharing stories that have happened right in Henrico County, where we have, whole division of people in Henrico working on and responding to this. Something feels different to me. And so to me, it's like, this is a good thing that we're all kind of moving in this direction. So yeah, when I see it, I'm like.
So when somebody would say, well, why can't you say all lives matter? I mean, how do you respond to that one?
I just respond that, that this is a group that's been marginalized and oppressed for so long, and they're the ones that need our help right now. Everyone doesn't need our help, and we need to rally around the people that have been oppressed and are dying at a faster rate with police violence, and have, there's so much data to back it up. There's so much data about, that can back up how Black people or people of color are affected at a greater rate than white people, depending on violence or like availability of AP classes or availability of going to college. Everything and every data you can pull. I'm a data person. You just use the data and it's there. They're the people that need our help right now. And so that's
I kind of think of it an
rational person.
But somebody said, when we say save the whales, we're not saying
don't save the dolphins.
Save the dolphins. We're just saying the whales are going to go extinct right now. And so
right.
The analogy, I was like, oh, okay, that's helpful. Yeah.
So it's just a very passive, that whole all lives matter is just a very passive aggressive way to say, no, I don't agree with you.
Yeah. So do you think that talking about racism, having these conversations, is going to further our divisions, or is going to lead to healing and unity?
I think it's going to lead to healing, because every single time that I listen to something, if you just I know not everyone's an Instagram person, but Instagram is where it's at. If you get on there, if you follow Brené Brown or Jen Hatmaker or Glennon Doyle or the conversations that are being had, I even saw Matthew McConaughey was having an uncomfortable conversation. These conversations, no one is going to watch these and walk away and go, well, I just think that whole thing is just dumb. I don't want to be involved in that movement at all. We're at a point in our lives where like history is being made, and we can decide which side of the line we want to stand on. And I know which side I'm going to be on, and everyone is welcome to join. But the conversations that are being had are meaningful and are backed up by so many wonderful resources. And, I'm sad and embarrassed that I haven't been involved in more of them for the past 5 years. But I know where I am now. So yeah, talking about them, the conversations, the uncomfortable situations, talking about what's going on is, to me, is only going to make things better, because more and more people are going to see, like, and hear the background and the education part and the data, and like, it's not people's opinions. I just, even someone who's somewhat resistant might say, well, where's that book? And I mean, and it's, the book I just read had 150 pages of footnote.
Wow.
Everything she said was at the end.
Yeah.
Every law that she cited, everything. It's like, this is the truth. It's just somebody's bringing it to the surface, and you're finally getting it.
Right. It's coming to light.
Yeah.
And it does make me think, light is a powerful image in scripture for, the world begins with light. Jesus came to be the light of the world. And so some of what this conversation is about is just about shining our light. And it's not a harsh light. It's a light of love and kindness and compassion. And it's important to shine it. So.
And there's no judgment. Like, if you didn't know and you come to that point, and I think that my frustration, I think, is that if the people aren't willing to just, if you are just willing to read one book by a Black author, if you're willing to read or listen to one podcast or listen to one, or even listen to this, or even, I mean, I wouldn't cite me as like something, don't use me as like enlightenment, but listen to someone that can give you some information. And then if you still feel very strongly, like, then I'm like, okay. But I think that if we can all get to a point where we can reflect and say, oh wait, like, I did things a couple years ago that I'm like, I can't believe I did that. And I own it. And I'm like, I reflected. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to talk like that anymore. Or that was wrong. Or did I make a student feel uncomfortable? That's all I think I'm asking for in the world and the country, is, can we get to a point where we can at least admit that maybe we all need to take a minute and look at our behavior and say, are we doing the best we can for each other? And can we all look inside and say, hey, do we need to do some work on ourselves? I think that that's really all I think is important. And there's no judgment. I saw the best little cartoon that was like, Black lives matter. No, all lives matter. And then the guy was like, no. And he explained it. And then he puts up a sign. He's like, aren't you going to be a hypocrite if you change? Am I going to be a hypocrite? And he's like, no, you're not a hypocrite. And he's like, okay, Black lives matter. It's like, you're not going to be a hypocrite if you learn and grow. You're just learning and growing and becoming a better person.
Yeah. Amen. That's a great place to end. God calls us all to that journey of learning and growth. Thank you, Erin.
We're so glad you've joined us for this episode of Uncomfortable Conversations with Each Other about Race. We hope this conversation has made you think, and we invite you to pray about the questions it raises for you. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode. If you would like to participate in a future episode, please contact us at Wellborn. I leave you with this Franciscan benediction. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain to joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all our children and the poor. Amen.